Before anything else, a direct, honest correction. Voyager 2 has not sent a final transmission. It has not gone silent. As of right now, in the middle of 2026, Voyager 2 is still alive, still transmitting data back to Earth, and engineers at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory are actively working with it, testing new procedures specifically designed to keep it running for as many additional years as possible. Any claim suggesting otherwise is simply false, and spreading that kind of claim does a disservice to one of the most remarkable, still ongoing achievements in the entire history of human spaceflight. But here is what is genuinely true, and genuinely worth understanding properly. Voyager 2 is approaching the end of its operational life, following a slow, carefully documented, mathematically predictable decline that engineers have been tracking for years, and when its actual final transmission does eventually arrive, likely sometime in the early 2030s, it will not be a dramatic, sudden event at all. It will be the quiet, anticlimactic culmination of a countdown that has been running since the day the spacecraft first launched nearly 50 years ago. This is the real story of where Voyager 2 genuinely stands today, and what its actual final chapter is honestly expected to look like when it finally arrives. To understand why Voyager 2's eventual silence is both inevitable and precisely predictable, you first need to understand exactly how this spacecraft has managed to survive for as long as it already has. Voyager 2 launched from Cape Canaveral on August 20th, 1977, 16 days before its twin, Voyager 1, on a mission originally expected to last only a handful of years, sending the spacecraft past Jupiter and Saturn before its planned retirement sometime in the early 1980s. Instead, mission planners took advantage of a rare planetary alignment to send Voyager 2 on a considerably longer, more ambitious path, becoming the only spacecraft in history to fly directly past all four of the solar system's giant planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, with that final Neptune flyby occurring in August of 1989, nearly 47 years ago. After Neptune, Voyager 2 kept going, eventually crossing the heliopause, the true physical boundary separating our solar system from true interstellar space, on November 5th, 2018, becoming only the second human-made object in history, after Voyager 1 itself, to leave the solar system entirely. Every single day since launch, Voyager 2 has drawn its electrical power from 3 radioisotope thermoelectric generators, sealed containers of decaying plutonium-238 that convert heat into usable electricity as the plutonium slowly, steadily breaks down over time. This process cannot be paused, reversed, or refueled in any way. At launch, these 3 generators produced approximately 470 watts of power combined. Today, after nearly 50 years of continuous, irreversible radioactive decay, that output has fallen to somewhere in the range of 250 watts, and it continues declining by roughly 4 watts. Every single year, a slow, entirely predictable countdown that mission engineers have been carefully tracking and planning around for decades. This is not a mysterious or sudden process. It is simple, well-understood nuclear physics, following a precise, mathematically calculable decay curve that allows engineers to project, with genuine confidence, roughly when the spacecraft's power output will finally drop below the minimum threshold required to operate any of its remaining systems at all. Managing this slow, inevitable decline has required a series of increasingly difficult decisions, each one representing another small, permanent step toward the mission's eventual conclusion. Of the 10 scientific instruments Voyager 2 originally carried at launch, several have already been permanently switched off over the years, not because they stopped functioning, but purely because the spacecraft's shrinking power budget could no longer support them. As of the most recent mission status updates, Voyager 2 currently has 3 operating science instruments: its magnetometer, its plasma wave subsystem, and its plasma science instrument, the same instrument, remarkably, that gave scientists their first ever direct measurements of the plasma environment at the heliopause back in 2018, an instrument that had already failed on Voyager 1 decades earlier, making Voyager 2's own version of it especially scientifically valuable. This is precisely why NASA's engineering team has spent much of 2025 and 2026 testing an experimental power-saving procedure they have nicknamed, internally, the Big Bang, an all-at-once restructuring of how electricity flows through the spacecraft's remaining systems, specifically designed to squeeze additional operational years out of a supply that would otherwise simply continue its steady, unstoppable decline. Rather than adjusting the spacecraft's power distribution, one small step at a time, testing each individual change, before committing to the next, this procedure reconfigures a whole group of systems simultaneously, switching some components off and replacing them with lower power alternatives all at once, specifically to minimize the amount of time the spacecraft spends in an unstable transitional state that could otherwise trigger its own automated fault protection systems and cause instruments to shut down unexpectedly. Because this procedure has never been attempted before, and because any single mistake could permanently damage a spacecraft nobody will ever be able to physically repair, engineers deliberately chose to test it on Voyager 2 first, specifically because it currently carries a slightly larger power margin than its twin, making a potential failure marginally less catastrophic to the overall mission. Suzanne Dodd, the Voyager project manager at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, has been candid and direct about exactly what this entire effort realistically hopes to achieve, expressing confidence that at least one of the two Voyager spacecraft can likely continue operating for another 2 to 5 years beyond what the unmodified power math alone would otherwise allow, while being equally clear that the process of keeping these unprecedented missions alive gets measurably harder with every single year that passes. This is not the language of an agency preparing to announce a sudden ending. It is the language of a team carefully, deliberately working to extend a mission that everyone involved understands is operating on genuinely borrowed time, engineered decades ago using technology that predates the personal computer, running today on less electricity than the light bulb above a kitchen stove. It is worth pausing to consider exactly how difficult the practical work of managing this aging spacecraft has actually become, because it helps explain why even routine operations now carry genuine risk. Voyager 2 currently sits more than 12 billion miles from Earth, a distance so vast that a radio signal traveling at the maximum possible speed anything in the universe can travel, the speed of light itself, still requires more than 18 hours just to complete the one-way journey. Every single command sent to the spacecraft and every response received back from it now involves a minimum round-trip delay exceeding 36 hours, meaning engineers testing something as complex and unprecedented as the Big Bang power procedure must wait more than a day and a half just to learn whether a single step actually worked as intended, with absolutely no way to intervene directly if something unexpected happens in between. This is precisely the situation that nearly ended the mission prematurely once already. In the summer of 2023, when a routine command sequence accidentally caused Voyager 2's antenna to tilt just 2 degrees away from Earth, severing all contact for nearly 2 weeks, until engineers successfully transmitted an emergency, dramatically amplified signal, nicknamed at the time an interstellar shout, that, against genuinely low odds, managed to reach the spacecraft and instruct it to reorient itself back toward home. That 2023 incident offers a genuinely useful, honest preview of what Voyager 2's actual final transmission is likely to look like whenever it eventually happens. And it is worth being clear that the real ending will probably look considerably less dramatic than any headline promising a sudden, shocking event might suggest. Based on the well-understood, entirely predictable decline of the spacecraft's power supply, engineers expect that at some point, most likely sometime in the early 2030s, Voyager 2's dramatic message, no last burst of urgent data, no clear, singular instant anyone could point to and definitively call the exact end. More likely, the signal will simply grow fainter and less reliable over a period of weeks or months, individual transmissions becoming harder to detect and interpret until eventually one final ordinary data packet arrives and no further signal follows it, with mission controllers only recognizing in hindsight, after enough time has passed without any response to their own transmissions, that the spacecraft has, at some specific but retrospectively determined point, finally gone silent for good. Even then, Voyager 2 itself will not stop existing or stop moving. It will continue traveling outward through interstellar space at roughly 34,000 miles an hour, following essentially the same trajectory it has maintained for decades, simply without any further ability to communicate anything back to the civilization that built it. Bolted to its frame, exactly as it has been since launch in 1977, will remain the golden record, a gold-plated copper disc carrying greetings, recorded in 55 human languages, the sounds of rain, wind, and ocean waves. Night. High minutes of music drawn from cultures spanning the entirety of recorded human history, and a set of diagrams intended to explain the basic principles of human science and mathematics to whoever or whatever might eventually find it, adrift somewhere among the stars, long after every trace of the civilization that launched it has itself faded into history. It is worth being honest about exactly how much genuine uncertainty still surrounds this precise timeline, since that honesty is exactly what separates a responsible account of this mission's future from a manufactured, artificially dramatic one. The Big Bang power procedure currently being tested represents a real, serious attempt to extend Voyager 2's operational life beyond what current projections alone would otherwise assume, and if it succeeds, meaningfully longer. Operation than the early 2030s estimate remains genuinely possible. If it does not succeed, or if some other unexpected hardware failure occurs first, exactly the kind of unpredictable event that very nearly ended the mission back in 2023, that same timeline could just as easily shorten instead. Nobody, including the engineers who have spent entire careers managing this specific spacecraft, currently knows the exact date Voyager 2 will finally fall silent. And every credible, responsible source discussing this mission has been consistently clear about that remaining uncertainty. Rather than offering false, precise confidence about an ending nobody can actually predict down to a specific day. What remains completely certain, regardless of exactly how the coming years unfold, is the sheer scale of what this specific spacecraft has already accomplished. Achievements that will remain true and permanent no matter when its actual final transmission eventually arrives. It remains the only spacecraft in human history to have visited all 4 giant planets of our solar system up close. It provided humanity's first ever direct, in situ measurements of the plasma environment at the true boundary of our solar system. Data, its own twin, Voyager 1, was physically incapable of gathering after its own equivalent instrument failed decades earlier. And it has continued transmitting genuinely valuable scientific data for nearly 50 years, from a mission that was only ever expected at the very outset to last 5. So here is the honest, complete picture of where Voyager 2 genuinely stands right now, in the middle of 2026. It has not sent any final transmission. It has not stopped. It continues operating today, transmitting real data across more than 12 billion miles of space, while engineers on the ground work carefully, patiently, to extend its operational life for as many additional years as the laws of physics will realistically allow. When its actual final transmission does eventually arrive, likely sometime in the early 2030s, it will almost certainly not be a single, dramatic, headline-worthy event. It will be a quiet, gradual fading, the natural, predictable conclusion of the countdown that has been running since a rocket first lifted this spacecraft off a launch pad in Florida nearly 50 years ago, expecting it to last only a handful of them. If you want to know the moment Voyager 2's actual, genuine final transmission eventually does arrive, subscribe and turn on notifications, because when it happens, it deserves to be reported accurately, honestly, and with the full respect this mission has earned across nearly 5 decades of continuous, extraordinary operation.